to round two of this class. Before we kind of get into the course material, I want to take the opportunity to introduce, we have a returning student. Danelle had been actually with a cohort that I had shepherded, what was it, last year, Danelle?
Yeah, it was last year.
Yeah, okay. And she is now went through a portion of the course and now rejoining NGS. She wasn't able to continue on, but we're excited to have her back into the program. And so she's auditing this course tonight, right, Danelle?
Yes, that's correct. This course I'm auditing.
Yeah. So if you would, I would like to introduce you to the cohort, and if you just want to say a few things, maybe a little bit about yourself and where you're at and what you do for a living, that type of thing.
Yeah, let's just real brief. I'm also active duty military in the Air Force. I know a lot of people active duty Air Force go through this course. I've got my bachelor's also through NGS. So I'm continuing my master's just like you guys are. I'm a technical sergeant. I've been in for 14 years and currently I'm stationed at wonderful Sheppard Air Force Base, Texas, in Wichita Falls. So I'm excited to be with you guys.
Okay. Well, we can talk Texan later. Okay. Well, hey, well, welcome. So she's going to be joining in with us in this course. She's actually, you had it last year, as I recall, 638. So you'll be just here to get familiar with the projects and with the cohort itself, is my understanding. I just was notified by Academic Affairs yesterday, and then we talked about this on Monday. So.
Yeah, I've already done this course. I'm just going to audit and see what's going on with all the projects.
Okay. Well, good. You always get a different experience. I don't know how many times I teach from my side, the courses, and so I learn something every time I teach it. So I hope that will be your case. So everyone, please welcome Danelle to the cohort, and you were involved with the UTC project, right? Remember, it was tool inventory issues.
Yes, exactly. That was it.
Okay, and we have another UTC team here that is working on a project, but the champion really wants to have UTC folks on that. But I know you had some familiarity with that, and that team actually turned out with some pretty good recommendations. So hope you have a great experience with that. And let me ask folks, is there any questions from you guys as we start out? I'll give you more insight about teams and where Danelle will end up after we have a discussion with her. And I've got to have some further discussion with Academic Affairs to get clarity about where they are and status of students. But I'll talk to you a little bit more once I do about where Danelle will end up. And if Danelle, you can hang on for a bit here after we finish the course, I'd like to talk to you about where we are with this. So, but let me ask folks, are there any questions or issues that you wanted to bring up? Okay. I take silence as being no. Okay, so let's dive into it, guys. Here we are. Again, this is going to be the last session that we have as a big group. I'll give you the specifics of how we're going to do the mentoring sessions. There's going to be at least 2 of them, but between now and the end of the month, between the end of the course. And this is where we'll have a chance for you as a team and myself to kind of go through your assignments, the data collection, and the other things that we have. We're going to kind of go over those things. The evaluations you're submitting, I'm going to review. I'm going to talk to you as a team within that. I know a couple of you were still needing to upload, and I reopened the opportunity for uploading your evaluations for those that may have not done the slide, the feedback on that. Please do that. But I will take that and your data collection plan, and we'll be integrated into our discussions about that and how you're going to use it and the way forward in our mentoring sessions primarily. And then I'll show you also before we leave tonight, and not only what should be in the slide deck that we have for that next session, but then the session after that, so you can see the big picture. We do have a discussion question, but I wanted to cover the root cause analysis discussion for week 2 before you actually started diving in and try to provide responses. So I didn't open up that assignment till just before class tonight. So if you look at it and say, well, wow, it's not open yet, you know, for you eager beavers who like to go through the entire, you know, set of discussion questions and answer them as soon as I can, I wanted to have cover some of the topics tonight that I think may be helpful and to ensure you get that assignment about right. And it's really about 5 whys and how you apply it. Even though it still sounds very simple, I've always kind of been my experience. A lot of the students get tripped up on it. They don't think it through and don't really kind of make the connections from one level to the next. And so I wanted to have that discussion with you tonight before you really tackle that assignment. And then we'll have a review of that as well when we have a discussion with you in small group. So as I mentioned, it's been my practice from the last time, if you remember that, first thing we kind of do is just to do a quick review of what we covered last week. And so I know that it was mainly me talking a lot last time about a lot of different things around the data collection area. So let me ask you, and just discuss this now in a more open way about some of the key topics we covered last week as a review. So who would like to start? Maybe and just kind of say, what were some of the things you remember from last week that we covered and maybe important, or maybe even had a question about? Anybody would like to get the conversation started? Okay. Okay, raise your hand. Let me call on you.
This is Edgar. The categorizing between quantitative and qualitative data.
Oh yeah, qualitative and quantitative data. Yeah, that's important to have. And I saw actually some of your discussion questions. Some of you, I think, Nicola, you talked about some of the challenges of asking good questions. But what's the difference? Can somebody just say what's the difference between quantitative and qualitative data? What would be some examples of that? What would be the difference between qualitative and quantitative data? How would you describe that if somebody asked you, like me? And anybody can jump in.
Qualitative data would be like metrics, time, count, and then qualitative could be opinion survey or feedback or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good good way to describe it. That was Sam, right? Thanks, Sam. Anybody else? Do you agree with Sam, or do you have anything to add? Well, actually, Sam, I think your fellow students think you're pretty sharp because they don't have anything to add. I guess you said it all for them, right? Yeah, and that is the challenge. So let me ask you, remember, we also asked and talked about why is it important? Because usually, and it's been my experience, particularly with newer teams, and particularly those who are in engineering or manufacturing fields, you just kind of usually gravitate towards the data action, the performance stuff, things you can count, cycle time, performance-related data of the equipment, of the machinery, things that are captured in work orders and such. So I usually kind of see that, as a bias. But let me ask you, some of the reasons we talked about last time, or at least I talked about last time, that you want to collect that qualitative data. What's the benefit of that, you think? In addition, just looking at the process, what's the importance of collecting the qualitative data?
Was it more to check with people about their buy-in or to engage with people, specifically like the stakeholders?
Right. That's, yeah. That's really one of the most important things, because when you kind of contribute your opinion or you ask people for their opinion, you kind of raise their expectations, but they also have a stake in the game. And a lot of times when you do data collection, you know, you want to be able to say, okay, we've asked members of that, and you're getting a little bit of their buy-in into it about, you've got my perspective on that. And so they may not only be more willing to be engaged in the description of the problem, but they also, later on, you will go back with them and say, okay, you know, as you indicated, this is how you see it. Here are some solutions. You want to engage them in the solutions as well. So you're also preparing the field for that. So that's a great great comment. And one of the reasons you want to do is get their buy-in. Okay. What other reasons? Why am I asking you verbally now to see if you understand what qualitative data is? Why would I want to be doing that? Same reason you would ask your own people within the organization, right? See if you understand it the same way. A lot of times people don't understand the process the same way. And until you ask them, what do you think? And it's amazing. A lot of times when you, and I would even encourage this, is like when you do process mapping. A lot of different ways to do that, but if you can get them in a group or a room and you actually go around and say, how do you do this process? And you get them to verbalize what they do. It's been my experience, it's amazing that a lot of times people that may have worked on the same process, maybe cubicle by cubicle, and then you ask them, what's your view of it? They have a completely different view than somebody that's right next to them, because they just have seen it that way. And they never shared those perspectives, or they bring in some element in there that is different. And until you ask them, you'll never get to that aspect about how they see things as well. So it's getting different perspectives. So how about another reason? Can somebody else say, what's the other good value of getting qualitative data, you know, where you actually have to go talk to members of the you know, users of the process, the employees, maybe even to the customers? What's the other great good value of ensuring that you're going out and getting some qualitative data? Anybody?
Hey, Professor, I'll chime in. This is Danielle. I know from my experience, it's important, especially at this point in the program, halfway through, being concerned with quantitative data, because that's where we might find something that we didn't know, such as human behavior. We're getting the perspective from someone else. Data could be collected through just observation, interviewing people. It's valuable information that we can't get or measure quantitatively, and it can be really valuable. And like, oh, geez, I didn't know that. Well, now I know that now.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also kind of enriching. You know, when you talk to people, it's just a different experience. You get to kind of get their nonverbal feedback. You get their emotion around the project, whether there is some or none, or maybe there's going to be resistance. And one of the things I found in this approach, and here maybe others can chime in on your experience as well in collecting data and the challenges of that, but is that you want to also flesh out the snipers. And I know, maybe I've used this analogy with you before. I know, Danelle, I think I have with your cohort. What's a sniper? Anybody can describe what a sniper does? Come on, guys. I know you watch TV.
Just they gather information, data, and then take a shot when needed.
Yeah, that's right. and usually they're well camouflaged, right? They're well camouflaged. If there's somebody that is against your project, right, that doesn't want to see it happen, if there's somebody that has a vested interest in not seeing success in your project, that maybe it's going to endanger one of their perks, or perhaps you're intruding on an area that they don't think you should be in, is that what you want to do is flush out these snipers, which usually hold back their opinions and take their shot when you're most vulnerable. I've seen some NGS teams in this situation where they're briefing back at the very end briefing, CEO or one of the guys came in and said, "Hey, you haven't considered this. I'm doing a pilot on a very similar thing, and you guys didn't ask me, but we're doing something very similar, and we need to run the course of this pilot, basically before we implement your recommendations." Now, he knew that all the time that this team was working on the project, but what they hadn't done was do kind of a risk analysis and said, okay, who's going to be in support of our project, who's in that? And a lot of times in the measurement phase, by figuring out who you want to go talk to, you're also gauging perhaps their willingness to support you, or whether they have an issue, but at least you can flush them out early on so they don't take a shot at you later on. It sounds kind of harsh, but I've seen this so many times in many different forms and fashions in projects, that there's going to be resistance, particularly if there is change. And if there is change that's going to go forward that impacts somebody, you certainly want to also, sometimes I collect data from individuals just because of that reason, is that they may not be in support of this, and you want to get that perspective. Also, sometimes if their perspective is contrary to your solution or to your approach, you actually want to consider that you want to also get, negative reasons why your project's not going to be successful, so that it will help you figure out better solutions. And so just getting that out in the first thing, that is very, very important. So good. So, hey, that's a great comment, Edgar. You kind of started that conversation. Let me ask you, okay, we talked about that, qualitative and quantitative data, and some of the rationale for that. What else did we cover last week? Because I know last week is really clear for you. You know exactly what we talked about. You probably replayed that recording several times. So what were some of the other things that you recall that you'd like to share with your fellow students about last week and what we discussed?
We also looked at stratification of data.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and why is that what's that about, and why is that good?
Well, particularly with our project, we're going to have a lot of data, and it's going to be a lot of data that's not familiar to most of the team. You can separate it and put it in categories. It makes it easier to understand, and it gives you a more direct focus or a path or which way you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great comment on. Anybody else want to add in a comment about stratification and its value to you? Give you a hint. It was about your discussion question, part of it anyway. Remember the discussion question? What happens if you have too much data? What are some of the challenges in collecting it? And thinking through your stratification, I think, DeCarlo, you talked about in your comment and discussion question about, well, let's look at, sampling. And so up front, before you start doing the data collection, if you think through how much can we do? What do we need, first of all, to be based on our problem statement, based on the customer's feedback, based on your process maps, what that information you're looking for. And then you want to also look at and say, what's the data that's out there? And sometimes it's just a big sea of it, right? Most organizations are swimming in more data than they can actually manage and care. And one of the things you have to do as a team is kind of figure out what's the most important data that you have to collect and to what degree you're going to collect it. And so one of the tools is this stratification, thinking about where is it, what type of data do you need, how far back are you going to go, and then you sit around with your fellow team members and maybe with the champion, maybe with me next time, and say, here's what we think is reasonable for the amount of time we have as students here to go collect that data. Now, I know, maybe one or two of you, have a higher priority than taking this course, but most of you probably just dedicate it where all your time is devoted to doing this course. And then, you go to, do your home a little bit, maybe see the spouse and the kids a little bit, maybe you go to work, but, or is it the other way around? Right? You're trying to figure out, how do I squeeze in all the stuff that I got to do between this date and this date, and then what's going to be reasonable. So I want you to think through, of all the data in your project, what you're going to do and when you're going to get it and what's reasonable. And so sometimes we say, okay, instead of doing a whole population and interviewing everyone, we're going to do a sampling, or we're going to look at these number of work orders back to this point. So there's a discussion point about that we're going to look at and discuss in regards to what degree of the data that you have capability of doing it. I know in most organizations, at least it's been the case, the ones I've worked in, they've got data that goes all the way back years, and you got to make a decision, how far are you going to do that analysis? And then, if you haven't done this before, where you sat down and looked at the data and tried to make charts out of it and figured out what it's telling you, that is one of the things I want you to learn. And for those who are experienced in this, please share what it takes to get to the data, take it from raw data and do the analysis on it, and how much time it takes. For most of the students that I've kind of mentored through this process, they have no idea about the time it takes, and they find themselves getting a little short. They collect the data, but then, what is it telling you? And then we're going to have to make it into some charts and darts. And we're going to cover some of those other charts and darts, like Pareto's and the fishbone diagrams required tonight. But I want you, when you develop these things, initially for the assignments of this course, I want you to get a sense how long it took you to get that data. And some of you are very polished in developing these charts. Others, you're going to be lost in figuring out, how do I plug data in to a spreadsheet or into a PowerPoint or a Visio or something like that that's going to allow you to do a graphical display. So one of the things I want you to just kind of get used to is that amount of time that it takes. And it's going to be important then when you go back to your plan and say, okay, of all the things we're going to collect, what's going to be doable? And that'll be part of our practical discussion. Be sure you got a kind of a practical feel for the duration that you can spend in collecting data. Okay. A couple more things from last week, and then we'll head off into the topics we have tonight. So anybody else, any key things? Thanks for the contribution so far, but let me ask, anything else we covered last week that you thought about? Okay. All right. One of the things I do want to just kind of leave you with when we cover this discussion here from last week is that, remember that diagram of the elephant? You may have seen this before, where one guy's, got touching an elephant, and they're all blind, and, well, the elephant feels like a fan because they're touching the ear, and, somebody's touching his tail, and it feels like a rope to them, and somebody's touching his foot, maybe that's a pillar. But all those diverse views combined is what you are going to be kind of doing. You're actually kind of like a detective now. You're going to be piecing together elements of this project. There are things that may be visible to some, visible to those particularly in the organization, but a lot of times you don't get the big picture. So one of your jobs is to get the big picture. What's the impact of the HR incentives? What's the impact on the talent of the people that are there? What's the impact of the machinery? What's the impact of the effectiveness of their process? And so all these things we talked about, and we talked about X's and Y's, if you remember that. What are all the figures and things we're looking for that contribute to this? But you also want to have a very objective view, and not preconceived solutions. So you're out collecting data to justify your solutions, but you really want to have an open mind. And that's one of the things that often a lot of folks that go through this course end up with, because you have such a diverse group. You have people outside your industry, outside of your work experience, and you just don't see the things the same way they do. You may not even speak the same language, as in the case we talked with the Air Force. And now we got Danelle in there, who also helped translate, by the way, the Air Force lingo back into to business or discussion. But one of the things that I want you to do, be sure, is you keep an open mind. A lot of times when we have our in mentoring sessions, you have preconceived solutions. I think it was Edgar in your discussion question. Wasn't it you that you indicated in here you had kind of made an assumption in your problem statement that it was human error? Is that correct?
Yeah. Trying to remember exactly what I said on it.
Yeah.
That a lot. So some of the issues that we've had is because of human errors. So that's one of the things that we're trying to figure out how to. I mean, you can't really fix a human themselves, but you can only help better them. And so I think we're looking at it from that angle of seeing what people know, or seeing their routines per se, and what they do in the specific task that leads to our FPY.
Yeah.
And from there, that's where we're trying to figure out, okay, kind of work backwards. Can we help them with a better routine, or can we get them, what can we do to help them that will end up bettering the FPY?
Yeah. You know, actually, when I read your comment, I was thinking, you get it. Is that you should go back and challenge your assumptions, and even in what you've written in your problem statement. Do I write it with a bias? You know, do I kind of assume this is what it is? And I will tell you often is that a lot of the NGS teams will first start focusing in on people, right? They need training. They're not incentivized. There needs to be accountability, and they focus in on that. But go back to your very first course in the words of Dr. Deming, all right? It's usually good people trapped in poorly designed systems. And you should focus on fixing the system as opposed to trying to fix people. And a lot of times I see, particularly in teams that are very new to the process, they focus in on recommendations. We need to have more training, or we need to have X, Y, Z, you know, accountability enforced. And that's solutions focused on fixing people and their attitudes, which I find to be very difficult to do. And probably you should try to fix the processes that these people are trapped into, and to look at those type of things. And so your assumptions about things, and whether you're blaming or focusing on human error, is kind of a natural tendency for a lot of folks, because that's what and some organizations, that's all they do. You know, that they hire and fire people because of success, and they don't try to improve their process. But one of the things I want you to be and do what Edgar had in the comment is challenge your assumptions as you go through all this. Am I thinking about the right thing? Are there other possibilities that I haven't considered? So that open-mindedness is one of the things that often leads to much better and innovative solutions. So maintain that as you go through. Okay. Anybody have any other final comments from last week or challenges? Hey, Ron, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay. When reading your discussion question reply, you talked about the measurement, that the actual measurement systems may not be sufficient or suitable, something kind of like that. And you talked about gauge R&R, right?
Yep.
Okay. Now, that is a fairly that's typically gauge R&R, which is repeatability and reproducibility of measurement systems. So could you just maybe explain for the larger group here about that tool and what you meant about that comment about what the current measurement systems?
Sure. So usually whenever I go into a problem or a problem statement, whatever the reason a project exists is because somebody somewhere has noticed something's wrong, and then they have usually some kind of like initial data or anything that kind of shows that something is wrong. So there's many cases where there's maybe like weights that are out of tolerance or something. So the first thing I like to do is kind of like examine how people are measuring the problem and kind of verify that there is a problem. Sometimes you go in there and you find out, hey, maybe we're not measuring things correctly. And one of the things, like you said, Gage R&R, is to try to maybe get a whole set of people and try to kind of confirm the problems that are seeing. So it's kind of like I'm generalizing anything, but my whole mindset is that we want to confirm that we are in fact measuring a problem, or is the problem how we are measuring something? And that is kind of like the initial thing that I like to do. And once you confirm that there is a problem, once you start looking into how we are measuring the problem, we can kind of get ideas on how to further find other ways of trying to get data to point at the same problem. Did that come through okay?
Yeah, and it's a great point that, and I wanted to expand on that a little bit because one, a lot of times teams will go in and there isn't the collection of data. Remember, that's one of the other points we talked about last time, that you may go in and find that what's being currently measured is not accurate or sufficient or consistent, perhaps. You know, we may have one shift using a little different technique than another shift and how they measure things. Or perhaps, you know, somebody reads the gauge a little bit differently than somebody else and rounds up and somebody rounds down. The other important part is about the qualitative data. It's amazing if you go on interviews. I always try to go in dyads, right? Fancy word for two of us, right? And part of that reason why we go in there as we collect data, which is interviews are, is that after that, we usually stop after that and say, what did you hear and what did I hear? And you share notes. And it is like, sometimes they will pick up different things in the same interview, right? They're same using English, everybody, you know, generally. And then we come back out and each one of us, a data collection, had different views of what we thought we heard. And so calibrating even the qualitative one, which is kind of an expansion of what Ron talked about, is that I would encourage that if you can, when we talk about doing the interviews, if you are going to do those, if you can have somebody maybe on the phone, okay, yeah, because you guys are all dispersed here, but maybe doing a phone interview, maybe somebody directly. If there's an interview of a key SME, subject matter expert, or member of the organization that you want to capture, if you guys can work out your schedule where you're like a lunch hour or 15, 20-minute interview where there's two of you listening to the responses, it provides a much richer and much more capable in ensuring that we all filter things out through our, you know, when it comes in, we filter it out through our, you know, feelings, our emotions, our perspectives, and things like that. So it's really important, even on qualitative data, that you understand that each one of you is a data collector and you're going to see things a little differently. So calibrating that. And then also just say, how are you collecting that data? And sometimes it's very sloppy. Sometimes it's very precise, and just getting it, you know, that discussion is an important part. So R&R Gauge is actually a statistical tool. You can introduce and use, if you guys are familiar with the Minitab, it's not required part of the course, but it is kind of addressing in evaluation of just how good the measurements are being collected and done. So thanks, Ron. I just wanted to highlight what you brought up. All right. So you guys are leaning forward, glued to every word and the slides, I know. And let's see if I can get this one to move. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about the analysis, because when you start collecting data, and the natural thing for you to do is start kind of, what are you going to do with it? And so one of the things, as we're going to talk about, is kind of expanding on the use of the tools. I want you to talk about how you're using, in conjunction with the data collection, your problem statement, because the other thing that you use to help figure out what data you need, go back to the problem statement. I know in the discussion question, Judith and Jay and Sam, you really kind of emphasize that's one of the things you should keep going back. And I want to reinforce the point that you guys brought up, that when your data collection, a lot of times teams start to wonder a bit. And I know when Danelle was here before, we kind of started out with one problem statement, and it kept changing a little bit as the reality and discussions with the champion occurred. It kept evolving. And that is sometimes frustrating because it may be not your problem, but rather the champion really hasn't quite articulated what they want done. Or there may be more than one influencers involved with that. Maybe the champion's boss has a little different view of what needs to be done, and that gets introduced to maybe, not at the beginning, but at a later stage. And so problem statements evolve, and you want to be sure, excuse me, that you and the champion and the school continue to have a dialogue about what the problem statement is. It's typical that they do evolve a bit. And it's so important because that is the foundation, right? That is how you help screen out what data you don't need. Sometimes it's very tempting to go following a rabbit down the hole, and sometimes you pick that up. In data collection, when you design that plan, I almost always say, okay, how much time do we have available? Now, because I'm a consultant, billable hours and how much time we're going to spend and how long a project will take is very important. For most of you, which are not in that situation, you got to say, well, how much time do I have available to do this? And you don't have kind of the, requirement to manage money in burn rates on contracts in order to get something done. But it's a pretty good perspective to have. And saying, okay, how much time are we going to take to go through this? And then, what's the doability of that? And one of the things I want you to kind of look at later on when we do our charter is about when do you think you're going to have the define phase finished? When are you going to have your measurement phase finished? What dates? And so the analyze phase is going to be that, we're going to ask you kind of give a ballpark, how much time you can spend in doing the analyze and where you want to kind of be and improve. So you can kind of use this DMAIC model not only as a methodology and a format, but it also helps you to do the scheduling part, which you learned, when you did your project management, is about where you should be with each one of these and how much effort that you can go forward with it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the measurement, a little bit about the analysis, some of the tools that are going to be required from NGS that you produce. The problem statement is one of them, CRM, process map, and then we're going to talk later tonight about the Pareto and Ishikawa or the fishbone diagram. These are required charts. These are ones at a minimum you got to have in your presentation, and you got to be fluent and capable of demonstrating proficiency in them. So we're going to talk about those tools. There may be others you want to introduce, and some of you got more tools in your tool bag than those two, but you can add those in, but those are going to be minimum ones that we want to talk about. And then you're actually in the analyze phase. If you look at it, the first thing is benchmark, and that's your next course. So it fits pretty well about where we are in here. And so once you start to look at your own processes and say, okay, here's what the current state is, then you start to go out and look at external information and say, well, how can I improve this process? So you need to know your own process first, with the current state, and then as you go out and look at comparisons, it help focus your benchmarking efforts as well. So it's integrated. We're going to focus a lot of our discussions tonight on root cause analysis and some of those charts and have any questions? If not, shoot me an email. And Pareto and fishbone, as I mentioned, are probably very versatile. You can use them a lot of different, kind of like a Swiss Army knife. You get a lot of utility out of these things. You love different situations, quite frankly. The other ones that we don't teach in here or much in detail, like the failure mode analysis, failure mode defects and analysis, is a pretty good tool too to use. And you can review in the Nancy Tague book that got a lot of their additional tools, and you'll have another set of tools coming out of the Lean. And one of the things that up front in describing what your type of project you're working on, if it's primarily looking at defects, looking at how many defects per million, and you're looking at a Six Sigma type of measurement where you're trying to reduce defects you're probably going to gravitate more to the Six Sigma set of tools. In an upcoming course, you're going to have a course on Lean, which is more involved with value streams. And if it's time where you're trying to make things work faster, things are taking not as many defects, but perhaps not being done in a timely fashion, you may be using more of the Lean tools. So one of the other things in describing what tools you use to collect data, whether it's a value stream or whether it's a cause and effect, or you're starting to use some other type of analysis tools that we will talk about, is that the nature of the project often will help you select the tools then, and you start to say, okay, is this primarily defect, more Lean, or is it more Six Sigma? We combine those two sets of tools, but when you start to say, okay, which ones am I going to use for this project, some may be more suitable than others for use. And so we'll talk about that later on. There are the ones that are mandatory, which as I indicated here, but if you're going to use some optional ones, I want you to talk to me in the mentoring sessions about which other ones you're thinking about that may be coming from the other sets of tools that will be involved with Lean or Six Sigma. And so the idea really is to get to the root of that, and so that it keeps popping up. And if you don't get to the root of the things, we really, fundamentally, here's a lot of words about root cause analysis and why it's a good thing to go out after. In your own words, what do you think root cause analysis is about? Anybody can kind of think about that for a minute. Have you thought about that for a minute? What's the great benefit of doing root cause analysis?
For us, the benefits of root cause analysis is we are able to identify the problem, and then we present 5 whys of why did this problem happen and what can we put in place to prevent it from happening again.
Yeah, Megan, that's a good summary. Yeah. Anybody else wanted to add anything on that? In fact, one of the things, and I think even when Danelle, you were in here last year, I still have the same problem I have last year with my yard, right? I go out and mow the weeds, and because I haven't been able to get them up by the roots, right? And plus the other thing, I'm at the end of our neighborhood, just about everything flows down the pipe stem, so if there's a weed seed that's, up the block for about 10 houses, it all comes through my yard before it passes into the forest. So that's the other reason. But they keep reoccurring. And until you get them out by the roots or you kill them and it kills the roots, they're going to keep reappearing. And so it's best to use a technique on something that reoccurs, right? And if you had in your performance management course in theory of variation, is a lot of times be sure that this is not a special cause situation. In other words, is it just happened one time? Is this something that normally occurs? Usually root cause analysis can be effective for that, but it is probably more important for you to say, okay, does this reoccur? And if we do something to prevent that from reoccurring, is that going to be beneficial? And so basically, typically in asking the 5 whys is that the things that are visible, what it looks like on the surface. Once you start getting deeper into that discussion, you truly discover things that maybe people commonly knew, but maybe really wasn't visible, wasn't really pointed as the primary reason why something was that. And that's why DMAIC is so valuable in this approach. It's really good for problems where the solutions are not self-evident, where you're kind of saying, okay, it's pretty common sense, we already go do this. DMAIC is best used on projects where those solutions are not as readily visible, that the causes of it have been reoccurring. It's been over a period of time And that's why we, in your problem statement, want you to describe, is this a reoccurring problem that's been going on for years or months? And is it having a negative impact over the period of time? Because it helps you focus in on something that is a reoccurring and maybe getting worse, or is in a bad situation and is not going to get better unless there is some type of intervention or some type of a solution applied to it. So that's part of the discussion. And when we select the problem, you know, why has it been going on? And it should be part of your problem statement. And so that's one of the things that is important for this. And cause and effect, be able to articulate the real source of that, and finding that, rooting that out, and identifying that. If you focus on that, often you get a good benefit from that. Does anybody have offhand any examples from your personal life that you would want to share about root cause analysis, where it may have helped you in your own journey so far, or know of a situation and you know where it provided benefit to maybe in your workplace or maybe even a family or something like that? Wheels are turning, huh? Have you any applied root cause analysis to a problem before?
I have in my workplace. We use root cause analysis a lot, and I'm actually the one that has to go out to each department when they have an issue and help them with whatever it may be. So for instance, for the bottling line, one of our root cause analysis was our laser code wasn't on the back of our bottles, which is a huge missing factor for us because that's our traceability. And if we were ever to have to do a mock recall, we wouldn't be able to go back and trace that bottle because the laser code wasn't on there. So we had to define that problem and come up with the 5 whys of why did this happen and how can we prevent this from happening again. And at the end of the story, we ended up having to add things to our morning startups for our maintenance guys for them to check and verify that the lot code is on the bottles and that they're checking it every hour to still make sure it's on there.
Okay. Right. And did you get it to an adequate solution then?
Yes.
Okay, great. And it's really a very simple tool, but I've kind of seen it used in ways that perhaps are not. And here's a lot of the cautions. And when you do the next exercise, just question on the 5 whys, I'm going to ask each of you to provide an illustrative example of how you use it. One each level, when you ask the why, is that they should have a connection. You know, okay, the reason why this happened is because, and that sometimes using that language is very helpful to keep you focused. Okay, the reason this happened, you know, we had this, you know, we were late today. The reason because of that was of traffic, and the reason the traffic was because there was an accident. An accident occurred because, you know, X, Y, Z. So what you're doing is linking each level of the whys. 5 is kind of a general rule. You may find discover, get to the root cause after the 3rd why. You might need more than 5. It depends on the situation. So the other thing as you start to talk about this, and that you should see a logical connection between those. In other words, the one is causing the other to occur. I give you an example from my, well, workplace. It happened today, and well, Monday, I guess it was, and kind of extended through today. But we have a project manager that is evaluated on how many projects he completes in a month, and he does construction. He's a division chief, and he's got, you know, a large crew, and they do projects from $25,000, I think, to $300,000, and he's supposed to do X within certain. He's supposed to do them with the time that he promised them. You know, right? That's a good thing to do, right? As a project manager, is to deliver on time. And so there's some accountability issues there because he was not meeting his standard, what they have set for him for the number of projects, and they're not being completed on time within that standard. And so we started to, you know, well, why is that type of thing? and he was in complete denial that there's any other root cause out there other than some of the work crews. And as we started to getting into the 5 whys, we found out that one, he wasn't even tracking the number of projects very well, and then we found out that his estimator, his assistant project manager, had told the crews that they were behind. He didn't want them doing any of the admin work, which means recording into the work order system their start times, end times, and all that, labor hours. He said, I want you to focus turning the wrenches and putting stuff up, getting that project done. We'll catch up on the admin work later. And so one of the guys on my team asked him, the deputy estimator said, why are you telling them that? Well, it's just because I just want them out there working on that, instead of putting admin time. But the truth of the matter is they found out that he wasn't doing very good estimates. And so by having the teams actually put in the actual start times and the target start times and comparing those things, it would have made him look really bad. So his reason that he gave initially was, hey, I want them out there turning, but the true reason was he knew that that data would come back and reflect on him poorly. And so that's why he did that. And so until he put that data in, we found out that there was a lot of blank fields that were not being filled out. So you can't have accountability, you can't have that. But it gets into motivations a lot of times as well. And so when you start asking the 5 whys, look for the reasons why people may not be incentivized to do something right. And sometimes there's a lot of overtime, for instance, because people are getting a paycheck on that. We did a project with the Coast Guard where guys were supposed to do painting, and they were not the high wage grades, and they really looked at doing the overtime as a benefit. And by being more efficient and getting it all done within the normal work hours, then they would lose that overtime benefit. So there was no incentivization for them to do things right. And until we tackle that issue, the cost overruns due to overtime would be continuing going on until they made some dramatic changes. But that's kind of an example of root cause analysis and how you might use performance metrics into that. So each one of you is going to have different situations in that. And what I want when we talk about this in your projects, when you brief it, is reflect back and say, okay, we're doing root cause analysis, and then say, how does this contribute to what you said is going to be in your problem statement? All right. How does this contribute back to something that is important and dissatisfied by the customers? How are we then looking at things that are causing them to be dissatisfied, or that whoever is receiving this thing, what's the issue that they have? So you start to relate it back and say, okay, what's the impact on customers? What is the impact on the overall problem statement? And so basically, root cause analysis is that after you kind of develop these and you start to collect data, is that be sure that you integrate your discussion and say, okay, here's how we see this contributing. If you can't make a logical connection, like we just come up with these things, but it can't tie it back to your problem statement, you're probably going to get very far in getting good credit for applying the rules of root cause analysis to your project. And so once you do this, a lot of times in here, you'll start to say, okay, why are we running things over? You'll be able to get cost and poor quality. You can use the root cause analysis to really, focus in on your solutions and your implementation strategy. So it's really an important aspect. And we're going to have you develop some tools along with that. So let's talk about those as we move forward. 5 whys, here's another resource for you to take a look at, the Gemba Academy. I hope you're finding that to be a good resource. Here's some additional insights you may gain from that, on the use of that. You may want to review that even before you do your discussion question. Okay. And then this gets back to the Pareto, which is the chart that I want to talk about tonight. There is in your course materials an Excel spreadsheet, which is kind of got a little tutorial how to fill in what data you put in, and you can make a Pareto chart. You don't have to figure out the formulas. You can just plug and play using a template. if you're the proud owner of Minitab or any of those statistical software or add-ins to Excel, most of them will take your data and make a Pareto chart. But there's some very specific things we're looking for. But let's talk about the reason for that. And that is, the rule here is about that basically you want to try to focus on, the vital few is the bottom line of this, is what are the things that are really causing the problems within your process, why it's not meeting performance targets or customer expectations, or why is it costing a lot of money. And typically there's, of all the things out there, that are causing that, there will probably be more important factors or more greater number of contributors of one particular type of thing that may be causing that problem. And so the idea then is what you want to do is be able to apply the Pareto idea and focus in on what are the things that are contributing 80% of your problems. Okay, and it's usually 20% of the things. Like when I was in the Army, I spent probably, with the problem troops out there, you probably spend 80% of your time with those, with the troops that have the issues, right? For those in the military, you probably realize that, it's the same thing with, within the school. If you're a school teacher, 80% of the class is going great, but you spend 80% of your time working with the problem students, or the ones that got behavioral issues. And so, and kind of the same thing is that same type of approach here for your project. Let's identify what are the things that are contributing most to the issues, and let's put it into a chart so we can look at that. There's a couple of terms we use it, separating the vital few from the trivial many. So when you have a lot of data, what it helps you to do is narrow down where we're going to focus in on. And this is probably one of the big things that, how do you focus in on very specific? So what we're going to do in your data collection, and typically what you do, you take a lot of information, you take a lot of data, and then you start to use these tools to narrow the focus of what you're going to focus your project on by using this data to focus on that. So it helps you scope the project from larger ones to say, okay, when we first start, we maybe was thinking of the problem was in these problem steps, or this was in this department. And now as we start to collect data and identify what are the vital few, now you're focusing on that, and that will become the direction of your project, if that makes sense. And so you're going from kind of a large to a more focused approach, and that's what we want you to do in this approach in collecting data. So we'll expand on that a little bit. And this is typical in a lot of NGS teams or Lean Six Sigma teams. You capture a lot of X's, right? This is, remember when we saw that, X's and Y's, what's contributing to the problem? Well, it may be a problem with the defects, like Megan, hey, we can't have traceability, it's a label problem. So let's look at, where are our issues in there? Let's look at the, how we're putting that on. Maybe we're not putting, we're having problems that have, through a period of time, we have an issue. Are we having issues currently and before we didn't, and that type of thing. So you're collecting data about a lot of different things, right? And now what you got to do is kind of figure out of all that, let's figure out a way to shift through that, categorize that to help us then identify those vital few. And so a lot of times it's providing an educated guess about what are the major causes, but it's also then kind of an evolution. You say, okay, if that's contributing to this, maybe what's the reason why that is happening? So sometimes you use these things in conjunction with other tools, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And okay, here's a Pareto, okay? It is prioritization as well, to say, what are we going to be looking at? Here's some uses of it in the real world. For instance, which defects occurred most frequently? Okay, is it is on this particular machine? Is it an error that occurs this particular element of that? Is it perhaps one worker is the most productive one in there, and the other ones aren't? We can even use a Pareto in that way. We've looked at, in fact, one of the things we looked at for this project manager was productivity of his things. We found that a couple of his folks produced more service calls and work doubling the rate of others. So why is, what are the, top performers? So one of the things that we looked at also in here, you can look at it in different ways. For instance, if you're an HR manager and you say, okay, when do I get the most resumes in? I have to sift through. Is there one day of the week that I get more than the rest? And you can make a Pareto that says, okay, what's the greatest opportunity? When do we receive this? How do I schedule my people when we get the most resumes? Is there something about that that I can use maybe to identify trends and categorize them? So a lot of different things. You can make what you see here at the bottom is not a Pareto chart. That's just basically a typical bar chart type of thing. And what will change this into a Pareto is when you add this 80% calculation, which I'll show you again in a moment. The term, though, I want you to take away from this is tall poles. In fact, you'll see it in some of the NGS checklists, is that do you have a tall pole understanding, which means that which ones are contributing the greatest to your problem, what are the vital few things that you want to focus in on, and typically they will be in this chart the tallest column, the tallest pole, if you will. And you want to focus in on that. And they are set from left to right. That's kind of the standard approach. And I'll tell you why in a moment. And then you focus in on those tall poles, which means that you're going to focus in on it. Here's an example. I'll let you eyeballs read through this in a moment. And then after you have a chance to look at it, tell me why that purple arrow, by the way, is pointed to that point in that red line above.
Is that the 80%?
You got it. Okay, Edgar, thanks. So when you do this, and this is the difference between a other type of charts, is that what you're going to put on this is where, like when they had billing errors in this example, right? Down here, how many do we have? We had 8 of them were non-core carriers, 15 core carriers. Okay, so you put them all here, laid out the number. What percent of the total, number of errors was it? Well, this 18 contributed this entire amount, about 43%. Now this one over here, this missing code, right, contributed 15, which is about 35% of the total. Well, if you add those two numbers together, you're going to get pretty close to what 80% is. And see this 80% line here to the right? You go all the way across, and when it intersects, that was your 80%. So these two areas here are probably the biggest contributors to the defects to billing errors. You just see that. Anybody not see that? Okay. So these two areas here, missing code and non-carrier, are the vital few. This is a taller pole than that taller pole, and this one is much more of a taller pole than that one. So the Pareto then would suggest that you focus in on these tall poles. In other words, let's go look at non-core, missing code, and maybe after we finish this, because if we are able to then make a impact on reducing errors in these two areas, we'll probably get to, improving this maybe 80%. Okay, if these are the things we're contributing, we're going to see a significant improvement within our billing freight errors if we are able to eliminate these two major reasons. And then the project then will focus in on that. That will be the focus. That's how we narrow that down. Okay, does that make sense to you? Okay. And so that's how the team kind of. So we'll give you a couple other examples as we go. And if anybody doesn't understand this or want to go through it again, I'll be glad to do this as well. Here's another recommendations. Okay. Okay. Where's the 80% on this one? What are the 3 or 4 or 5 categories? Which categories, if you look at the example here, contribute to 80% of the problem?
First three.
Okay, right. Again, what you do here, you go across. Now, I highly recommend when you do the charts, in fact, I will kind of insist on it, is that you be sure that you demonstrate where that 80% cross line is, okay? So if you go through this roughly, these first three areas, order entry, customer order receipt, and work order makeup, are going to be the key delay times or reasons for key delays. And so if you look at it and the way you read it, okay, that's how you brief it. So, okay, if you look at the chart, there's our tall poles based on the data. We're going to focus our project on these things. This is where we got the data from. And so we're going to really kind of focus on improving those top three processes to get the improvement. So that's kind of how you would brief this. And then what you really is helpful here is you actually put some type of indicator, you know, where the arrow is, or, you know, maybe color code these as the 80% to distinguish them from the rest. But that's just a kind of a visual briefing type of technique. Okay. Okay. So how do you do this? Well, a lot of this will be data and be a big variable. Some of you are collecting this data that will go into this through check sheets. Maybe you have an Excel spreadsheet, maybe observation. You may even have, you know, who said the most comments about particular, you know, what was the most generated area of interest in interviews. And then you develop even a Pareto. You can use this on qualitative data in that. And so one of the things is then you say, okay, how often is this occurring? And then use that data to develop one of these Pareto charts. I would prefer when you get your project done that you actually use real data for our briefings, and for this that we can use it so we can say, okay, do you have this that you can apply to your project? Some of you may have not collected the data yet from your MVP to populate one of this, but I want you to do even a notional one that would be something you think you would collect data on your project for our mentoring session. So I can see, you know, how you grasp this and do this. So you're going to have to gather data and look at it and say, what's the frequency, or how often is it contributing to whatever your issue is, and then develop one of these Pareto charts. Okay. And here's a couple of things in just interpreting this. Clear Pareto, no clear Pareto. Take a look at the two charts. Which one do you think has a very clear, you know, identification of vital few, really clear about, you know, what are the major problems addressing this project? So if you take it to the two project charts here, which one do you think has a real clear Pareto effect, and the other one maybe not so much?
The left one
is which one?
The left one represents a clear effect.
Okay. And why do you say that, Ron?
Because it shows that, you know, 80% of the problem are caused by, you know, a few causes are the effect of most of the problem.
How about the other one? What do you think? What's the issue here with this one, the one on the right?
The one with that one is just that almost all of your attributes are causing all the problems.
Yeah. Where's the 80% on this line here? Okay. Remember the technique? You look at the 80%, go right across. How many poles are underneath that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the 80% here, you have a lot of things. And when you have something like this doesn't give you a real clear, you know, that's maybe a lot of things go out after. And so we'll talk about a couple of techniques here. When you have a lot of things that doesn't give you a real clear Pareto, in other words, it doesn't show what the vital few is, maybe we need to recategorize them. You know, maybe we got too many of these categories. Maybe there are things we could combine that would, you know, kind of make sense. Because that's what you're kind of looking for out of the Pareto, is a real clear, you know, set of tall poles. These are fairly close, you know, not significantly different, but fairly close in the amount that they have here. And what you may want to do is look at this. So let's talk a little bit about that. Is that if you can, what you want to look at and say, what are our categories? Maybe we should recategorize this if I'm not getting, you know, clear impact of what we would look at. Here's a couple of things, some recommendations. I have a chance for you to read through this, and then I'll talk about it a little bit. So. What's a weighted factor? How would you apply that, you think? What might that be used in developing a Pareto? What do you think a weighted factor would be, or how would that be used in this? What do we mean by that?
Are weighted factors, are those things that are more important to the organization?
Yeah, yeah. So once you lay out these things, you know, just like Megan mentioned, right? What's the consequence of not getting that label right again, Megan?
It doesn't meet our regulations and requirements that we have, and then it doesn't, you know, it doesn't look right on the shelf or anything else.
Okay. And you mentioned traceability, right?
Yes, and traceability.
Yeah, let's say there's something wrong with that, Bob. Right, there's something that, you know, for instance, you know, a piece of glass got caught, or there was a production problem with something. You want to have traceability. Is that important? Was that prevent a lawsuit? Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
You know, that may be a thing, and maybe be a little bit more important than whether the graphic was printed properly on it. So that label may be of a higher value in that category than if you look at, you know, all the defects. And so that's a prime example of how you might apply a weighted factor based on importance, either, you know, whether it's to safety or cost or customer satisfaction, and say, of all these things, which ones have that? And you agree on that, you apply that weighted factor, and then that will do is can kind of maybe consolidate that and say, okay, of all the things on here, we're going to focus in on those that are not only the greatest frequency, but perhaps the greatest importance using this criteria. So that's a great example of how you might introduce that into the use of this. Okay. Here's another tip that we have for you for Paretos and Gimbas. If some of this is fuzzy, we have this more in the TAG book as we go through, but I want to cover the interaction with cause and effect. Let me ask, before we leave Mr. Pareto here, anybody have any questions about utilization or, you know, how to read the chart, how to even maybe perhaps put one together? Anybody have questions on that at this point?
Does Excel have the functionality to produce a Pareto chart?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part of that.
Does Excel have the functionality to produce a Pareto chart? Because I've only seen them displayed, but I've never seen how they're actually made.
Yeah, not without an add-in, I think, right? I think, does anybody else know, do you have the statistical pack add-in to your Excel? Because there's usually a free add-in to Excel called StatPack, I think it's called. Anybody familiar with that?
I'll have to check on that one.
Okay.
Yeah, you either need the add-in or you have to write a macro that'll do it for you. That'll put it in the right spots to make the Pareto come out right.
Yeah. For your purposes, I've given you one. I've given you an Excel spreadsheet that has the capability for you to just plug in data, and it will provide a Pareto chart. I've put one together for you. that it basically, if you just plug in the data, you should develop the cumulative line, because typically that, most charting like PowerPoint and Excel will give you a typical bar chart type of thing, or one of these type of charts without the cumulative line. That's very, very important, because that is where the 80% in doing it. So if you look in the course material, there's a template in there. If you're a member of ASQ, I think in there they offer maybe a free template similar to also for Pareto making, but you got one in the course material that should work for you for this. And so you experiment with that. If you got any troubles, then I'd like for you to, before we get together in our mentoring session, we can maybe ensure that you're comfortable and confident that you can make one of those. Don't try to hand jam it. It's going to be done through Excel. Okay.
I'll do it, Professor.
Yes, thanks, Tiger. Anybody else got any questions on this? Okay. Okay.
Real quick, Edgar. Sorry, this is Dave. Edgar, you're at UTC, right?
Yes, sir.
Your quality department there, they'll have Minitab. So even if you can't make it in Excel, you'll have to use somebody else's computer, but they use Minitab pretty regular there. So you should be able to get it from them.
Okay, we'll check in with them. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Stick more tools in your toolkit. Steal shamelessly, by the way, if you can. Whatever you can, you go to this course. A lot of times you find out you use these things over and over again. So if you got things, by the way, share them. If you get any templates or get anything that's really cool and neat, whenever the courses we have, be glad to set up a folder, or you can share it with your fellow classmates in the portal, and that's a good way to do that. And I think I shared with you a lot of the software at the very beginning that's available. But these are the things that quality consultants have. This is having good tools makes you better and more capable. So let's look at the other thing. This is going to be a required chart. The cause and effect. Pareto, Ishikawa, kind of after the inventor of this. So it has all these names. So the intent of this is a lot of different formats in here, but typically what you're going to do as well is that we again have a Gemba tutorial on that. And what you want to do then as you develop this, you put typically your question or your problem statement in here. There are some standard categories that you can use for these boxes, and typically I will, for instance, like on procedures and policies and plant and people, and then you say, what are the issues that are contributing to this problem, and you develop a diagram with this, and you show the cause and maybe why that is happening. So it's again a graphical representation of things. It relates back to the 5 whys, of course. Often you will collect this data through the qualitative side of the house, and that you maybe use it after you do an interview and say, okay, what are the major contributing problems to why we're not first time pass through yield, okay, or why we have such a problem with supply or maintenance not being done on time, or whatever the issue that you're working on. And then you say, okay, is it a policy or procedure type of thing? Is it perhaps manpower related? No, we don't have sufficient talent, or they're not trained, or they're not experienced enough. So then you start to categorize those things, that maybe things you got from observation or through your interviews, kind of the qualitative things, and you put them out on this, and then you start to say, okay, this is all the things that we see contributing to this. And so that's kind of the intent, is to make a graphic. It provides also the ability to ask some whys, to think about what are the contributing factors to why things aren't going. And these categories, though, they're often here are the ones that you put on the end of these things. There's very typical ones that you may have, like it has manpower, procedures, environment type of thing. You can Google them. You'll find that there are other categories, and they're very helpful. Even when you do your Pareto, you start to think about, are our issues around manpower, procedures? If so, where's the biggest amount of issue or problem area that we have? So you use this maybe in conjunction with a Pareto. It's a very powerful then integration of tools, and this is where we really want you to be, is not just talking about the individual, how to make a Pareto, but how do you use that in conjunction with a fishbone diagram? And for instance, if you go out and collect data, and from the champion through your observations, through brainstorming, through SME interviews, subject matter expert interviews, and you collect it on a fishbone diagram, and then you say, okay, maybe one or two of these areas is where the area is. Then you show maybe what that area and say, okay, yeah, we think we're having a lot of defects because of lack of training of workforce. Well, how many errors will contribute to that? And then you make a Pareto. So, and then you show those things. Okay, here's what we came up with, and here's the data that is quantifiable by quantifying the degree this cause is. So you can use these in conjunction with each other. And sometimes even with Paretos, you'll have, okay, here's the tall pole, and then here's the contributing factors behind that. And then you have another Pareto. So don't be afraid that you just use one. A lot of times you may have one or two or three, and you say, okay, hey, we looked at the root causes behind this non-core carrier problem, and we did another Pareto, and we find out that here's the root causes of that reason, and it just keeps going down a little deeper. So there's different ways to apply these tools that help you really kind of focus in on what we have. And again, these are just examples how you might use them in different settings. The more comfortable you get with the tool, a lot of times kind of the first time when we go through this, a lot of the teams have a difficulty say, what are the categories? How shall I use this? And that's why we're going to do this practice in our mentoring session, be sure you're capable with that. So a lot of those are just examples. There is this analysis pack in Microsoft. You can use a histogram, but as I mentioned, one of the other kind of rule of thumb, try to keep it underneath 10 categories, because if you got more than 10, you're not focusing on the vital few. You've got way too many things. Again, you want to try to narrow it down, try to keep the categories of the data you're collecting under 10. Use the other tools. By the way, Minitab you can get as a student while you're a student. It's pretty cheap, actually, very cheap if you want to use a very sophisticated tool like that, or these other add-ins. So these are just some techniques and how to get there. And this is if you click on this, it'll take you to the ASQ has a free template. I think it's still valid. I haven't clicked it on recently, but it'll get you there. And then checking your course material. I gave you one. Okay. I don't want to, leave you with the idea these are only tools for cause and effect. There's a lot of other things out in the kit bag, but we're not going to cover these in this course. You will get a lot of things that these other tools like Lean will come up in your future course, and use of talk time, and some of the other things. All these, for the most part, are in your Nancy Tegg book. So, and we'll kind of reinforce that. So, any questions about fishbone diagram? How do you collect it? How do you develop it? What type of things might go into it? All right. Okay, we'll see. And then as we go through this, if you have, be sure that in the head of the fish, okay. And usually it's, fish are going upstream, so keep the head to the right. I've seen some students, they develop, they get fancy, they get a big fish, diagram, and they get all artsy crafty with it. But generally, keep it focused. When you do the chart, if you put up on there, this is a Pareto chart, right? In the header, would you present this? Just don't put Pareto chart in there. Leave your audience, when you do the briefing on this, what's this about? root causes of your problem. That's what it is, for instance. So in the title of your chart, be more descriptive. Just don't put Pareto chart in there. Tell your audience what are you providing. And your head of your, here is usually what you put your problem statement. What are you trying to, what are the root causes of defects, okay? Or what are the issues that are the key issues impacting our MVP? And you lay them out here. But be descriptive here, and in your title, be descriptive about what you're providing that about, whatever the topic is. So just don't say fishbone diagram or Pareto, but be what is it really about in your title. So when you brief that. And then if you haven't been able to collect real data, like do interviews or assessment, brainstorm what the categories may be for your fishbone diagram. Develop a, root causes of this. It may be hypothetical at this point, but I want to be able to see that you can use the tool in an effective manner, and it often will help you maybe kind of jumpstart once you do get to your real data about areas you want to look at. A lot of times I've done brainstorming techniques with that, or even a finalization type of thing, and then you can take that information and overlay it into a fishbone diagram and say, okay, here's the things we got from these interviews and brainstorming. Here's what all people said, what are all the things impacting why this problem is, why it exists, and they came up with all these reasons, and then you laid them out visually. So you have to be concise. These are like 1 or 2 words, be sufficient enough that the idea is conveyed in that. And then if you have 1 or 2 areas that may be contributing more, in other words, you think are more important than the rest, you can do some things on the fins, for instance. You can circle them and say, okay, this area here appears to be said by most people, or this one was something that we really found impacted, cost a greater thing. And so of all the things that are on this display, you can also then kind of use a visual technique to either circle them, maybe color code them, and highlight the importance perhaps of that root cause to the overall problem. Are there certain ones of these that you're going to continue on and then focus in on? Again, you're talking about narrowing the scope of your project. And then you may also use then a Pareto to show the actual data, behind an issue. Hey, we found we have a lot of admin errors. Well, what does that mean? And then you would show a Pareto. So here's the admin errors we had, missing items, incorrect entries, late entries, whatever it might be, and then you show Pareto. Okay. Good to go? Anybody got any questions? Okay. And then here's the transition piece that I want to cover with you, and a couple of things that we're going to ask you to do before the end of your course, this course. One is to draft up a charter, and I'm going to cover a form that I uploaded this afternoon called the confidentiality statement. So for those who did the download, there was one file that was missing from that, and I'm going to cover it with you tonight about what the expectations are for this and where we're going to go forward with your charter. When you guys did the project management, you didn't do a charter at that point, but you talked about it. Is that correct? For the MVP? You guys remember your project management course? You had a project management course early on, right? Hey, Megan?
Yes, sir, but I don't recall us talking about charter.
Okay. Yeah, I saw you click in, but I couldn't see you. I couldn't hear you. Okay. So this is where, at this juncture, here's the intent, is that before we finish up the course, is that you're going to do a draft charter. we're going to lay it out. It's going to be tailored to each one of your teams, and I'm going to go over that in a second. The champion, as I mentioned before, needs to sign this. Each member of your team needs to sign this, and I will sign last. If there is any issue, whether the champion wants further clarification or has some type of confidentiality issue about information, we want to identify those early on. I mean, we want to identify that before we leave this course, because we need to have this signed. If we can do it, you know, between now and the end of September, that'd be great. If not, we would certainly want to have it signed by the time we finish Master Business Process 2, which is, of course, after this upcoming one. And so these have to be in place for you to continue on and get a, you know, progress, is have these things signed by myself, you, and the champion by our Master Business Process 2, which is, of course, after next. So what we're doing here is that getting the charter ready. Once you develop this charter, draft it out, furnish it to the champion, see if there's any questions, seal that. If there are any issues at all that the champion has, let's discuss that. And I have done this with the champion. Sometimes we do run into questions that they want, and I will be glad to give the champion a call and have a discussion with them about how the data is using, or the, you know, the school's moving forward. I know we talked a lot about this at the very beginning of the first two courses, but now as we kind of progress and the champion probably has a better feel for what this project is about and the focus of that, sometimes there are issues. And so now it's been sufficiently kind of percolating and maturing and on the stove that if there are any concerns, then we'll flush it out. And if there's not a signature or they want to proceed to this, then we need to work that out. And I don't anticipate any of that. I don't think any of you anticipate that, but you never know. It's amazing, because this is kind of like when you go to signature, a lot of the issues often come out when people put the names to say, hey, I'm agreeing to this, because it also describes roles and responsibilities of both the champion, myself, and you as a team. And so I always tell teams, you know, up to now, you've been kind of dating this project, right? You've been going out for several months. It's time for you to get married to it. So we're going to formalize that marriage with this contract. And this is going to go into your tracker. This is going to be a part of your repository for your projects. And so these are the things, and I will tell you, typically, you know, if you go through project management and go for your PMP certification, you know, projects are charters like one page, identifies, you know, project management costs and that type of thing. But we have some other specific areas we want in our charter tethered to both the academic environment as well as this. And I just mentioned this as a part of that. Every team's got to have one of this. And then let me just kind of pop over and start discussing that. Let me see if I can bring up here a copy of the charter. So bear with me for a second. Okay. This is a form that is in the course materials. Fill it out. And let's see, you should see this, right? Okay. The Microsoft Word doc. All right. It's fill in the blank type of thing. You put the anticipated date of the charter signing. So I'd like for you to come up with, if you talk with the champion, some of you on them are on travel, very busy, but try to get that date negotiated when they will be able to sign this, review this. Put your team members that you have here, add a, you know, here for you guys in team 5. Would they have 5 at that member? The project sponsor, that'd be the champion. Okay. That'd be me. You put in my name here, and then once we sign this, because what we'll do, actually, this will be signatures here. So I'll put in the written name, then you sign it underneath. Do the same up here, and so you fill this in, and I want you to have the draft here. I want to be able to look at it before you go to the champion. And basically, on the background, this is basically in part 2 here, background, put your problem statement. That's really what your focus is on. You may want to put, the duration, how long this has been going on, some of the additional information, but typically the problem statement is what gets involved with this. You may also describe, how long has this issue been going on and what the financial or business aspect impact to the organization is. The scope, this is things you talked about should be, at least have been in your project management, what's included, anything that's excluded, but, the focus of your project, fill that out. This is basically a template, a standard template for the roles and responsibilities. One of the things I always include or recommend that you talk to the students is that part of the sponsor's responsibility is to participate in in-progress reviews. Hopefully you're meeting with them on a regular basis, but at least maybe once a month or after each class. That's recommended where the team talks with the champion, and hopefully you can do it like maybe with either a video or a conference or maybe a telecon where you all jump on and have a chance to interface with the champion. Guys at UTC, you probably are doing it, directly, but you need to have regular meetings, and part of the free consulting that they're getting and this set of solutions for the price of sponsorship is that they should be participating and giving you guidance and supporting you. And there may be things that you need from them, like access to data, or at least telling the workforce, need to cooperate with you, and setting up the environment for success. And so one of the things in 4.2 is that you can also add in here, participate in regular IPRs, that part of this template that's really a good thing to do, so you spell it out for them. A lot of the times the champions are far exceeding, the 1 month. A lot of times we've had teams where the champion actually jumped on and, became, want to participate in the feedback session. They were so involved. But you have varying degrees of champions involvement. Each one of you do. So this is my responsibilities. I'm also a liaison to the champion. So if there's any questions or any issues, let them know that if they want to not address that with you, but want to talk to me, I'd be glad to do that. Or you think there's anything that needs to be negotiated, come up on the net, let me know, and I'll address it with them. Now, project milestones, success criteria, review that. Here are the deliverables that you'll be providing to the champion. This is basically the type of things you're going to have that you can be developing and providing to the champion. For the most part, these will mirror the academic requirements you have. You'll have a set of recommendations, a present state, current state, and you integrate that into what we're going to evaluate you in regards to. But these are specific deliverables that are going to go back to your champion. So here's what lays it out. And then the fill in the blank part here is the project milestones. So what you need to do is take a look at between now and graduation, because that's when, Master Business Process 3 is when you graduate. So between now and then, you want to lay out a schedule. Here's the baseline. As I mentioned, go back in, take a look at the courses, look at the measurement. Some of you may not, because of the extent of data you have to collect or the difficulty of the data you have to collect, your timeline in collecting that may be shorter or longer, may not be standard from team to team. But generally, as I mentioned, we probably want to bring together, close down current state, present data collection by November. So whether you want to do it, in October, November, general guidelines that you probably want to have something like that. Then when you're going to have your recommendations in, and then some of you will have pilots where you do recommendations for improvement. So I want you to backward plan, use the techniques that you have from your project management, but lay out when you think you're going to have these deliverables. And this will also cause you to have a larger picture focus of what is upcoming. Take a look at that calendar I provide. There's going to be some things to help you to see what are the courses upcoming and when do you think you're going to have. And I want to have a discussion with you before we move forward in here. But basically take a look at, fill out the schedule. And then if there's some requirement before, typically when you start your last course is when you do the briefings back to the champion. Reasonably in the first week of the mass course, you brief me with your draft recommendations. we do a refinement, then you go back to the champion and then do your final briefing and recommendation to the champion. So if you kind of think about that, generally as a rule of thumb, unless the champion needs this earlier, is that you may want to look at them when your last course is, maybe the second week or third week of that, and then you want to check with the champion, hey, are they going to be on leave, or there's a conference, or any of you, not going to be available? So sometimes there's adjustment of dates, but have that discussion. So this is the charter that needs to be completed, filled out. Just kind of fill in the blank, fairly straightforward, but you may have some questions on that. So when we have our mentoring session, I want you to do a draft. This is going to be due before we finish up this course. When we do mentoring session B, which is our second one, I want to go over this with you, give you feedback on that. If there's revisions that need to occur between now and our next course, so be it. I want you to provide us a read-ahead to the champion, see if there's any issues before we go to signature, and then after we get it finalized, we want to do that. Any questions about the charter? All right. Here's the other document that will be done in conjunction with the charter. So what you'll do is get the thing signed. Everybody, I sign last. Is that you get the signature from the champion. You guys all sign it, and you also get that at the same time this what we call a non-disclosure statement. This is part of the discussion we had, like with UTC. There's sensitivity about any of this information that you're doing. Now you have a pretty good idea what type of data you're going to be collecting. Is there any issue from the champion's perspective about how this project, whether it's going to be put into a publicly accessed portal? Does he have any issues about wanting to review the information that's being used or posted before you guys kind of go forward in your project? And this form is really kind of ensuring to the champion that you, one, as a team, and then each one of you will respect the fact that you are using their data and that you're not going to, basically use this data for any other purposes than your academic requirements. That you're not going to, use it to discuss with any outside agencies. You're not going to use it for personal benefit. You're going to be, except for those that are in the organization, a lot of times you get promoted by doing good projects. But it's the use of the data, and sometimes that we've had, not often, but champions say, hey, yeah, I want to redact a couple things that when we talk about X performance areas, before that, I want to black them out or change them or phone them up or something like that. So we want to have that discussion, and this is what this is about. And if there's any questions about that, again, bring it forward. Usually it's very infrequent that we have issues, but sometimes we do. But sign this, sign the other document, you'll scan it in, send me a copy, I'll sign it, send it back to you, put it up into the tracker, and that's going to be one of your requirements before we complete the course. This has to be in there. Okay. All right, any other questions about what we covered on the charter or the material that we covered tonight? Let me, before I bring this disclosure, let me cover our final deliverables. That's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. Hold on, folks. I know you're starting to run for the door. Okay. So these are the things that got to be filled out in that. Okay. Here's just this 48 hours to you guys. Whenever you have your mentoring session or our next class, when it needs to be done. For some of our larger cohorts where we have to kind of sift through a lot of assignments and work things through, some of the faculty needed 48 hours, but for you, because there's such a smaller number of teams and such, whenever the guidance I give you about what's in the portal, when the dates are due there, or verbally, go by that instead of that. So when we do this, before we have our next session, we'd like for you to get the presentation put together. You send that ahead of me, and then we can schedule. Now, we can start our first mentoring sessions. We can do all next Wednesday at during the time frame. We could start a little earlier if it's so desired by any team. Instead of 8 o'clock, we could start, I usually get back in from work, depending on traffic, 6:30 or so Eastern time. and we can go to 9 o'clock. So I can start a little earlier if any team would like to do their mentoring session. If you want to do it on a different night than Wednesday next week, then so be it. Let me know. We may be able to work that out. But generally for me in the evenings, again, it'll be true, at least 6:30 or a little bit later. And then the second mentoring session, again, will be the same sequence. So if you want to do it on Wednesday, I'm going to ask for one member of each team to let me know what your preference is as a team when you want to meet with me. And let's go through the assignment. Okay. So for the first thing, here's the sequence of slides that you need to have in here. These are things I think 1 through 9 you pretty much should have already from your previous classes. It may be some refinements. And then I want to talk about your operational definitions, collection plates, any issues or comments that you have, particularly from you as a team about your project. I'm going to talk to you about the individual evaluations at this point. And then if you can do a draft of the charter at that point, that'd be great for the first session. If you can't, if there's an issue here or you got questions about that, we can address that at that point. So if you would, these are the things we need to have before we get together. So figure out what makes good sense for you as a team. This is what we need to have done ahead of time for our first mentoring session. Okay. Then you're going to be developing the Pareto. You're going to do fishbone and Pareto root cause analysis. Okay. And this is kind of what we're looking for that second session, is that in addition to the data collection operational definitions, we want you to have a fishbone, Pareto, root cause analysis type of discussion, and any issues or other things that you have. And hopefully we have then a refined charter so that will be one that you can then send to the champion and be ready to sign. Take a look at dates that you may want to have for signature on that charter as well. We'd like to have that discussion. So these are the things that we're going to be talking about, kind of the format. And when we get into this is going to be more conversational and briefing. But you're going to go in our next class, Master Business Process 2. We're going to kind of transition from a kind of back and forth. At the end of that class, you're going to do a briefing where I'm going to listen to you. And you're going to go through each one of these charts and explain its purpose. You're going to say how they relate to each other. You're going to talk about the journey that you have, and I'm going to listen to you. I'm not going to give you feedback as kind of in a conversational two-way thing. So I'm going to have you do a briefing, and you're going to, each one of you kind of be a participant in that. So that's going to be upcoming Master Business Process 2. In this particular course, as we go through this, be prepared to talk to each one of these charts, what issues you may have, where you are in that, and that's going to be more of a mentoring conversational discussion. And we'll have a little bit of that in Master Business Process 2, but the final deliverable will be a briefing for there. Okay. All right. And these are minimum requirements. If you want to add other stuff in there, other charts, you feel free to do so. But you should have the entire team comfortable and able to brief each chart. So some of you that are black belt, or got a lot of experience in belt, and you whiz a lot of things out, that's great. But I'm also looking at ensuring that each one of your other fellow teammates are equally conversational, knowledgeable, and capable of explaining and maybe even developing those charts you have. So you have things up and above the minimum requirement that was on that list. That's great. That's fine. It may be very appropriate for you, but be sure that all members of the team, not just one individual, can do that briefing. So those are some comments here. What are your other questions? That's all I had for you tonight, guys and gals. About the assignment or material we covered, I'll turn it back to you. Judith, thanks for enjoying it. Any problems, Judith? Are you okay? I know you.
Yes, sir. We're still, I would say, displaced. We can't go back to the keys yet, so we'll just reconstituting, consolidating. Our boss, the commander, had a town hall today, and we were laying out a plan, the way forward, the way ahead. what's going on for both
Yeah.
family members and the workers.
Okay. Let me know, whatever the dynamic is there. I know it's a tough time, and since you were down there, so if you need extra time, but post it. So best wishes
We'll
for
work it
you.
out, sir.
Yeah.
Have an excellent team. We'll work
No
it out.
doubt.
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay. So, Megan, you got any questions? You good to go?
I'm good to go.
Okay. Sam, how about you?
I am good, sir.
All right. Okay. Edgar?
Pretty much that. Just got to schedule things with Cameron because I'm currently away on vacation from work, so there's things that we got to meet up for sure.
Vacation. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Good. Cameron?
No, I'm good, sir.
All right. Good. Takalo?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Such dedication. Let me just, you need to be recognized because what time is it there?
It's 3:53 a.m.
Oh my goodness. Okay. You deserve a salute. Hats off. Thanks. Let's see. Who else we got here? Let's see. Edgar. Dave.
Good.
All right. Dave?
Yeah, I just had a question. I noticed one of the document there was a signature block for a supervisor. Who is that?
If it says lead faculty, it would be me. If project there's going to be your names on there. Supervisor, lead supervisor. Typically, sometimes they call my role. That would be me.
Okay.
And we'll use my payroll signature. It's Ernest L. Ellinger. It's and then as opposed to Professor E or anything like that. So if you fill that out, we'll get that looked at. Okay. Otherwise, you good to go?
Yes, sir. Good to go.
Good. Judith?
We're good to go, sir. I'll catch up with Matthew and he'll share some of the notes with me. But otherwise, I'm good to go, sir.
Okay. Matt? Let's see. Let me check to see Matt real quick. Note to Matt. Okay. And Ron?
Yeah, I'm good to go, sir.
Okay, good. And let's see. Did I miss anybody here? Oh, Danelle.
I'm still here.
Okay. Glad to have you here. And did I miss anybody else? All right. Thanks, guys. Mentoring session next time. I'll send you a separate GoToMeeting invite for that. Figure about 55. If I got anybody back in, sometimes it's been my experience, we spend more than an hour. It's on your nickel, basically, if you want to continue on after the first hour, and a lot of times teams do that. But if somebody's back in behind me, or past mentoring session, that won't be happening. So talk amongst yourself, if you will. By Friday, let me know your team's preferences when you want to meet. I wouldn't want you to go too much beyond next Wednesday. If you want to do it Thursday, next week, fine. But getting this first set of requirements in that briefing, I would kind of want to do it over the next week. If you want to go maybe a day later, but don't try to do mentoring session A and B like one night, and then the next night the second one. That's probably not a wise course of action. So send me your recommendations for when you want to meet. After you complete these mentoring sessions and we meet all requirements sufficiently and make any corrections we had based on our discussion, upload this into the tracker. And then once we get the finalization of your charter, you'll go forward to that to your champion. Basically, that will be the end of the requirements. Do the discussion question in there that's around the 5 whys, and then these 2 assignments, and then that will be your tasks for this EDU 638. And I'll hang on for a bit here, Danelle, if you can do that. And if anybody else wants to, ask more personal questions, be glad to do that. And so thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Oh, yeah, I thought you wanted to be a presenter. I'm sorry. Hey, Dave, you still there? Megan, I think you're offline, right? All right. Hey, Dave? Hold on, Danelle. Safe round, not sure. Oh, okay, hold on. Okay. Matt, safe round for translation here is that I think that's a EOD or a military term for basically there's no explosive issues or hot items that are bothering anybody that may interfere with their progress. So that's alibis is also a military. I'm not sure who put that. I didn't put this in here, but I understand them. Often they're used on a range, firing range in the military. Is that if somebody hasn't fired all the rounds of their weapon, they call for alibis, which means that they can continue to shoot while others stay in a safe position. So there may be people that, hey, I've got one more question I want to ask, and that's what that is meant from that. So thanks for asking. Okay. All right. Hey, Danelle, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. All right. I'm finishing up with the recording. Let me